said we no longer to do that, so, all right, it's done.
All right, our apologies to the people at home who couldn't hear us. So I'm going to start over. All right. In light of the planning board's unfavorable recommendation on O-24-042, an amendment has been made to the original legislation, which has been included in the agenda packet tonight. The amendment adds a new subsection, 190-16.b 3A. All single-family residential dwelling units of 2,000 square feet of habitable floor area or less are permitted a base occupancy of 4 unrelated individuals. For single-family dwellings larger than 2,000 square feet, the base occupancy remains 4 unrelated individuals, with additional unrelated occupants allowed at the ratio specified in Table 16-1. Applied to the habitable floor area exceeding 2,000 square feet. The public hearing will reflect the original ordinance as well as the amendment. Further discussion and action will be held during the regular portion of the meeting. Right. If there's any members of the public who would like to testify in favor of this legislation, please come up to the microphone and state your name and address.
Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's
Just a point of order.
Yes.
Just to clarify that the public can come up and speak either in favor of or not in favor of either the original or the amendment.
Thank you.
Just to clarify that as a point of order.
And two, we usually have an introduction of the legislation as well. I think having to read that giant paragraph has thrown me off. Mr. Durfee, can you introduce the legislation, or would you like Alderman Thibodeau to do so? He's waved to you, Alderman Thibodeau.
Thank you. Introducing this legislation to help with overcrowding that is happening in some of our neighborhoods. Originally, we looked at updating Table 16-1, changing that from 1 person per 300 square feet in a single-family dwelling, unrelated household, to 0.6, essentially making it 1 person per 500 square feet. As Alderman Moran had mentioned, we went before the planning board a little over a week ago, and they had some concerns with creating a baseline for this ordinance change, or this resolution change. So then we came up with the 2,000 square feet equating to 4 persons that could reside in a 2,000 square foot unrelated household. And I picked that just because of a lot of starter situations might start with 2 couples, their first apartment, that kind of a thing. So that's why I picked that number. It seemed like a reasonable number. And then anything that was going to be above and beyond a 2,000 square foot would have that 4 persons, and then they would have to refer to Table 16-1 for any additional that they wanted to add to that household. So that is the resolution. And
Great. I appreciate you coming and presenting that. So then we'll open up to public testimony. So if there's a member of the public that's in favor of the original or the amended version of this legislation, please come up to the microphone, state your position with your name and address. Seeing no one in favor, I'll move on to opposition. Again, if you're opposed to the original, the amendment, or both, please come up, state your name and address.
I'm Reverend Sally Newhall. I live at 33 Digital Drive here in Nashua. And thanks to Link, I knew this was coming up. I don't exactly understand the amendment that you're recommending, but I was pleased in the article to learn that you were taking time to think about the implications, because there are implications, for instance, for homes for domestic violence victims who aren't related to each other but are hiding in a home somewhere in Nashua. It has implications for folks who are trying to figure out how to handle their addictions, whether to alcohol or to drugs. And we have homes in Nashua that house those folks. And I'm not sure how your revised amendments impacts those kinds of homes. And I would hope that you would be making sure that there was a space within our community to take care of those folks, which I think are among the most vulnerable in our community. So I'm just concerned that this seems to be going through rather quickly, and I'm not sure you're having time to really think about all the implications. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition to either the original or the amendment? Please state your name and address to the record.
Hello, my name is Anthony Salvucci. I'm with the New Hampshire Coalition of Recovery Residences out of 2.5 Beacon Street in Concord, New Hampshire. I'm rising in opposition of the proposed ordinance being placed tonight. While I can understand your desire to curb overcrowding in our communities, we need to ensure that we are cognizant of the negative impact that this will instantly affect a large population of this community. Nashua has historically been a community in which recovery housing was able to find a stakehold and flourish in this community, find a lot of support within this community, make themselves better as well as the Nashua community better. Individuals in recovery, if they stay in recovery housing, are given greater than a 100% increase in their likelihood of sustained long-term recovery, which is recovery or sobriety greater than 5 years, in addition to other boxes that they can check, such as reestablishing family connections, establishing their financial stability, cleaning up many past legal issues that may take place or may have taken place in their life. That is what they utilize this housing for. These folks are protected through the Americans with Disabilities Act and therefore through the Fair Housing Act as well. And the square footage number that has been selected is even outside of the NFPA recommendations for other styles of homes. I believe theirs is in NFPA 101, I believe it's 200 square feet per resident, whereas the ordinance that I have viewed says 500 square feet or 0.6 residents per 300. This will instantly, after speaking with some of my operators here in town, will make 110 people in the city of Nashua homeless instantly. That is a burden that they do not deserve. These are folks trying to come back into the community and make it better. These homes require individuals to work on their recovery, work on their lives, and maintain sobriety or freedom from drugs and alcohol while they reside in the home. And all certified homes in the state of New Hampshire are required to have policies in place to address issues of relapse as they take place in the home to get individuals not placed out on the street, but into additional safe areas, whether it be the respites throughout the state of New Hampshire, other sober homes in the state of New Hampshire. But I want the public to know and to understand that individuals in recovery housing should be your best neighbors. They are the ones that are eager. They are the ones you can be sure have oversight that someone is doing random and scheduled UAs throughout the week. And these are residents that we should welcome into our community and not turn away from. We're coming up on Christmas, and this is a time where I like to reflect on the fact that there isn't a family in this country that can't look around their living room on a holiday and find a loved one that has battled addiction or is battling addiction. These are our family, these are our friends, these are our loved ones, and they deserve safe, suitable housing regardless of their disease process. So I ask that you reconsider or consider voting no on this ordinance, and also would like you to know that if there are ever any questions as it pertains to certification with New Hampshire Coalition of Recovery Residences, I'll be glad to share my contact information and I can come to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Durfee, I'm sorry, Director Babb. I just had a quick question. Would this ordinance impact existing properties, or would those properties be grandfathered in?
Sam Durfee, Planning Manager for the city. No, the existing and permitted properties that would be subject to this are already grandfathered. So this change would not impact existing operations. It'd be for anything that changes use or residency type.
Thank you.
Okay.
Director Bagley.
Bobby Bagley, Director for Division of Public Health and Community Services. I would advise that we consider not making any changes that would increase any additional folks being unhoused in our communities. Yesterday, we learned that through our 2023 point in time count, our state of New Hampshire has a 52% increase in our homeless populations. We don't want to do anything that's going to increase that in Nashua. I do understand that the current houses that we have right now will be grandfathered in, but if there is a need for additional housing opportunities to be created in our community that will provide housing for individuals that are in recovery or going through recovery, that we consider that. We just don't want to create any more barriers or challenges for folks in our community. Housing and the homelessness problems that we're facing right now is a result of insufficient housing, and so any way that we create more insufficiency in housing is going to create a problem for us. So I would think that we would want to take that into consideration. Thank you.
And Director Bagley, did I also read, and am I correct, that New Hampshire had the largest increase of homelessness in the entire country?
Correct.
Thank you.
According to the information from the 2023 point in time count. Yes.
Per capita persons, I assume, but
The
very
rest of the
intriguing.
nation had 11 to 12% increase, and New Hampshire demonstrated a 52% increase.
Substantial. Thank you. All right, so we'll go back to testimony in favor of either the original or the amended version. Anyone else that popped in want to speak in favor? Seeing none, all right, we'll go back to testimony in opposition. If anyone's opposed to the legislation as originally proposed, amended, or both, you can feel free to come up and speak. All right. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:13 PM. Then we'll move into our regular meeting at 7:13 PM. And I would like to express my apologies to Alderman Lopez. This was supposed to be a joint meeting, but I fumbled and communicated poorly to my colleague to make that happen tonight. But he has gotten his entire Human Affairs for the most part here tonight to listen to some key information. All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Melbourne Moran Jr., Chairman.
Here.
Alderman Derek Tebow, Clerk, is here. Alderman Ernest A. Jetty. Here. Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
Here.
Alderman Tyler Govea, Vice Chair.
Here.
We also have with us Alderman Patricia Klee, Alderman Chris Thibodeau, Alderman Tom Lopez, Alderman Tim Sennett. We have Sam Durfee, Planning Manager, and Bobby Bagley, Division of Public Health, Community Services. And on Zoom, we have Director and COO Tim Cummings.
Are there, I'm going to open it for public comment. If there's anyone here that wants to speak on any legislation to be acted on tonight, feel free to come up and speak about the legislation. All right, seeing none, I would like to invite Director Bagley up to the horseshoe for a discussion on the warming shelter. Thank you for joining us on short notice. We appreciate it. I think we're just all interested in how it's going on Elm Street.
Thank you, Alderman Moran. Bobby Bagley, Director of Division of Public Health and Community Services. I'm here to just give an update on how things are progressing with the warming station on Elm Street. The building has been secured to this point in such a way that using the cafeteria will only give access to the cafeteria through the means of egress into that space. We have it set up already. We're just now at the place where we're waiting to get our staffing on board. We have had the opportunity to interview 9 individuals to fill the per diem warming station support positions, and 6 of those have been moved forward for hiring through HR. And so at this point, we're waiting for them to get their query checks done, or whatever the process is through HR for the query checks to be done. And then once that is complete, we'll be able to bring on the per diem staffing for the warming station. Our goal is to have staff that will cover anywhere from 4, 6 to 8 hours as assigned on a staffing schedule. We're looking to have a minimum capacity of 2 individuals covering the shift from 7 to 7. And depending on how many individuals are in the warming station, we may have up to 3 individuals there as well. During the time that folks are at the warming station, they will be able to have access to resources. And so we've had conversations with some of our community partners that provide services for mental health, behavioral health, substance use disorder, any other resources that will help benefit individuals that will be participating in using the services. These service opportunities will be presented to them. According to the OATS, which is the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund, we have to make sure that we're providing this information for folks so that they have access. It is going to be a low barrier warming station, which means that individuals who aren't ready to go into recovery or individuals that have used substances will still be able to come in. They will not be able to use substances on site, and that's why those resources will be made available there as a part of the RSA for the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund. That information has to be provided for those individuals. With regards to being low barrier, again, people will be able to come in and to warm up, they can leave, and they can come back in as well. So we're going to make it as accessible to folks as we can. What else am I leaving out here? So we still don't have a date as of yet, because until we get the staffing, we can't open, but the site is ready for us to open it up. The work that needed to be done to secure it, meaning that folks can't go into any other areas of the outside of the cafeteria from the school, that's all been done. So we're all set for that.
Is there going to be any Narcan distribution or the syringe exchange on site, or referrals to Revive or anything like that?
So referrals will be made to services. We were not planning on having syringe exchange going on during that time of service. We will have Narcan available on site just in case if a person goes out, comes in, and experiences an overdose. Narcan will be there to be used, but we will not be doing syringe exchange while on site for this. The purpose of this is really to come in to be able to warm up, so we won't be engaging in those activities.
And then last week, a member of the public had questions about safety there, which if were answered at the listening session, but this person wasn't unable to make it. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misrepresenting this. This is a public building, open to the public, 18 and older, just like the library. Even though kids can go there, this is not for kids. This is not a place we're gonna frisk someone, pat them down because it's a public facility. Just like we wouldn't pat someone down going to the library. We're not in the business of security checks for members of the public going into a public building. Is that correct?
So the expectation is that when folks do come in, they're not going to be able to bring backpacks or bags into the general space where they'll be sitting, playing games, or doing other things. They will have to check their bags in a particular area in the warming station. And if they need to get to their bags, they'll have to do that with one of the staff that will be there. No, we will not be frisking, patting down, or doing any of that of individuals. There will be guidelines and expectations that folks should not be bringing substances on site. However, we will not be frisking, checking orifices or anything to make sure that that's not happening. That's going to be the expectation. I'm just looking across the room. I'll look over here.
I think those are usually reserved for people who go to jail, and this is not meant to make someone feel criminalized in any way.
Correct.
Oh, and Alderman Lopez, then Alderman Senate, then Alderman Clemens.
I was just hoping, Director Bagley, you could talk about the the job description, what the salary someone could expect is, and what the background they have, just in case somebody might be interested in applying?
So from the top of my head, without having the job description right in front of me, our expectation is that the folks that are interested in providing this type of support and working with our population is that they have some experience with a population that may have behavioral health issues, mental health issues, that they have experience working with individuals that have substance use disorder, that may be from lived experience or from professional training. What we're offering is a rate of $25 an hour. Because the schedule is set for 6 to 8 hours, we do not anticipate or expect folks to want to work so that they're getting paid overtime. That's not the point of this type of position. We do need individuals that have compassion, patience, and again, have some experience with working with a population that can be sometimes difficult to work with. We do need for folks to be able to de-escalate situations if they occur. We need for folks to be able to talk with individuals if they are in a mental health state without necessarily looking so much at that mental health state as well as much as looking at what's happening at that particular time. So folks have to have that type of experience. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
You
Okay.
hired 6 of the 9 that applied?
I'm sorry?
You've hired 6 people?
So far, I've been able to put forth the PER Act for 6 of the 9. We just interviewed 3 at the end of the week last week, and that PER Act hasn't gone through yet, as of yet.
Sorry, Alderman Clemmons and Alderman Senate. I have to remember the committee first. I was reminded by the clerk.
Oh, well, I'm okay to yield to Alderman Senate, and I'll go next.
All right, Alderman Senate.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk has to keep me in line. It's the rules.
Well, somebody's. About 3 weeks ago, we closed a 2-week RFP window that I see that we got 5 responses on for staffing for that. At what point was the decision made to not go with any of those responses?
After we had the opportunity to review, a couple of things were taken into consideration. So a number of those that did respond to that RFP were out of state. They were staffing agencies. One in particular was sort of new to this kind of arena. We're looking very specifically at individuals that we know have experience with working with this population, and we didn't have confidence that a staffing agency would be able to provide that. One was as far as, I want to say out in California. There was one that was right over the border in Massachusetts. We are looking at, there was one agency that provided just staff, sort of like,
Backup?
I'm sorry?
Like backup staffing?
Yes, so that might be considered down the line, but as far as a contract with a couple of these agencies, that didn't seem feasible for us. We also did get a response to the RFP from the previous consultant that we worked with. Their cost was a little bit higher than what they had put forth last year, about $40,000 higher. So we just considered that would be out of our range for what we wanted to pay for this. We also had some confidence that we could provide the oversight that's needed for a per diem staff pool between our housing services officer, LaTanya, and myself providing the schedule and providing the oversight. And because we've had so many people that apply that have done this type of work, we have confidence in that group of folks that we're hiring.
Follow up? Thank you. And it's your belief that with the methodology that you're going with for hiring now on a per diem staff, that you'll still be able to maintain this station 7 nights a week for the duration of the planned opening?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you to Director Bagley, my question is, assuming that this is a success, which obviously we hope that it is, I don't think that Elm Street is going to be redeveloped even in the next year. So we'll probably be here again next year. So assuming that that's the case, what is the plan to try to help or to try to get these folks to commit to coming back next year and maybe even opening this up earlier, say December 1st or before Thanksgiving or something like that, assuming that, do we have that in the budget, and B, are you looking that far ahead?
Director Bagley? Go ahead.
Yes, Alderman Clemmons, we are. And so because we have learned that there won't be any work moving forward with Elm Street within the next couple of years, that is our plan, that we will use this site again for next year. And so we're positioned to be able to start this earlier. If we had the ability to do so and things were able to move along a little quicker, we were really hoping to get this open by December 1st. So once we were able to confirm that Elm Street was going to be the site that we were going to use, we went right into full swing of trying to get this opened as soon as we could.
Follow up?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think this is a good community resource that we need to have. You know, I live in the neighborhood. I live a couple blocks away from there, so you know, I have no problem with that being in my neighborhood. I think it's something that, again, this community needs, and it gives people a place to go, and I'm hoping that it's very successful. So, thank you.
Thank you.
What's your, you can leave this open-ended, but what's the best idea you think you'd be staffed to open?
Well, I
location?
sent an email over to HR to see where we were with the per X that was sent through, so I'm just waiting to hear back. We, generally, the process is that we send over our per X to HR, letting them know that we're interested in certain candidates. They'll send back information that provides an offer letter. The person accepts the position, then we do the Corey background check, and I'm not sure if we do the Corey background check before the other piece gets done. I think they have to accept the position first, so I'm just waiting for that piece. Those background checks have been done relatively quickly, within like 72 hours, and so I think we're just waiting to get those offer letters to get those things moving.
Director Cummings, are you in charge of HR?
That's a loaded question. Yes, I think you could fairly say that, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Just to give you a little preview as to where we're at relative to the process. No offer has been made yet. We have not technically hired any employees. As Director Bagley has indicated, at the end of last week, interviews were conducted, selections were made, and the paperwork, the initial paperwork was sent over to HR for the process to begin, where they will be given an offer letter. Once the offer letter is given and they've accepted, a criminal background check will occur, and then an onboarding and orientation needs to occur as well before they could be deployed as full city employees here for us.
What's your timeline so you don't hold Director Bagley back?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't believe an orientation type process is going to happen in the next 2 weeks due to the holidays. I would anticipate you're looking more at if the individuals successfully pass a background check, and that's still to be determined. You'd see an orientation happening probably the week of January 6th type time frame. So I would anticipate them starting anytime, being ready and available anytime later on that week.
All right, thank you. Disappointing, but thank you. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Director Cummings, through you. How long is orientation? Is it a week?
Oh, it's just one day.
Oh, it's one day?
It's a one-day process, onboarding process.
Okay, so we're thinking, roughly the 8th, 9th, 10th, somewhere around there. Because, I mean, it's been cold.
I think that would be fair to say.
It's getting colder.
I think that, I think that would be fair to say, something like the 8th, 9th, 10th timeframe. But again, and this is something I want to highlight, that is if everyone successfully passes the criminal background check. And that's, I'm hoping everyone does, but that is, a condition of employment.
Thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Through you to either Director Cummings or Director Bagley. Let's say that's just a hypothetical here. Let's say 2 of those people don't pass the background check or something happens, they decide they don't want to do it. Can we please move forward with this, even if it's not open all the time, some of the time, with the employees that we have? Would that be possible? And then move forward on the hiring process for other individuals? What I don't want to see happen here is, well, we don't have a full slate of people, and then you're waiting, and then those people don't have jobs, so then they go.
So
Can we
Alderman
avoid
Clem-
that
yeah.
situation?
Yeah, and I believe that is the plan, Alderman Clemmons. Again, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. I actually believe this will be done in a few tranches, if you will. You'll see the first tranche go through. I don't believe you have enough personnel right now to be able to man and staff the operations as everyone desires. So I would anticipate a couple onboardings to be able to be quote unquote fully staffed. I would think that that's going to take, to your point, it'll be rolling, but it would take, the month of January or whatever the case may be, depending on when we get additional candidates.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not to take a second bite at the apple, but this discussion sort of opens up a new discussion. I'm going to cycle back to my original question. I understand the methodology of how we got to the point where we are about choosing to go with per diem employees versus any of the RFPs. But as I indicated, sort of leading in my first question, that was 3 weeks ago that we closed that process. I have to wonder, hypothetically, if maybe we shot ourselves in the foot a little bit. At what point was the decision made that none of the responses were going to be adequate, whether that's budgetarily or otherwise for our needs? And when were those per diem jobs posted?
Director Bagley.
Yes, I'm going to look to see. I think we posted those, and Director Cummings can help confirm that. I believe that we started that posting 2 weeks ago. If not, as soon as we knew, we were able to get that posted. And then there's a process with that as well. So I want to say at least 2 weeks ago. And we started interviewing. And so we have, in the first set of interviews, did the PERACs for the first 3 that went through, and did another set last week. And then there's been another set that's been done. So we've got some in the works. With regards to even the staffing, or if we were to hire or contract some of those agencies on, we still would have been like pushing up into January. There was one agency that let us know that they wouldn't even be able to get started until sometime in mid-January. And so we were trying to push this forward by going through this process with the per diems, because we could ramp that up quicker. So even if we had brought on some of those subcontracts, that still would have pushed us out until January.
Follow up.
And if I may answer, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, then to a follow-up for.
So I just want to clarify, the posting for the per diem jobs have been up for a few weeks now. I would say less than a month, more than 2 weeks.
Follow-up?
Yeah, not really a question, just sort of a remark that I feel like I've repeated a couple of times this year at this point. But I've lamented the fact that earlier this year, we didn't really get the ball rolling until the end of January for the previous winter's warming station. Now we're encroaching on the first couple weeks of January for this winter's warming station. And as Alderman Tebow pointed out, it's already been cold more than a couple of nights this winter. I know we sort of started treading this discussion in August. Evidently that wasn't early enough. So I guess I would just plead to whoever has the ability to make this happen that however early we have to start this conversation, if the conversation for next winter has to start tomorrow, let's start it tomorrow, because this isn't good enough. It's simply not, and I'm not trying to offend anybody by saying that, but we're falling short here, and we can't be falling short on this front. Not where New Hampshire has had the greatest increase in the country in the homeless population year over year. We can't be doing this. Thank you.
Alderman Jettie, then Alderman Tebow, and then Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, if I could, just, following up on that, it just, I don't mean to, I know nothing, almost nothing about human resources and the Human Resources Department and, how an orientation, could occur. But, when I'm sure I'm saying the same thing that a lot of people are thinking. We've got the building, we've got the people, and now we're hearing that, we can't, and the orientation takes a day, and we can't find a day to orient these people before, a couple of weeks into January. It just, I'm sure there are reasons, and I don't know what they are, but if there's any way that could be speeded up, finding somebody who could orient these people, set aside a day, quicker than what you've told us, it would be appreciated. I mean, if we get, it's mild tonight, relatively speaking, but we've had some cold weather, and it's going to get cold again pretty quickly. And to think that these people would be out on the street because we can't find somebody to orient the staff.
Right, I would agree with Alderman Jettie. I mean, these people are freezing and outside. I think someone who has a nice paying job here at the city could make some time to get these background checks and orientations done and out of the way before Christmas. But again, we don't manage the city. We just vent and complain sometimes. Who did I have next? Alderman Tebow, Lopez, then Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know Director Cummings probably wants to say this, but background checks are, done at the state, and so you've got to wait. I mean, I've gone through it in being in the corporate world. That, one time my background check, and I have nothing bad on my background, took over 2 months, and of course that was during COVID, so things were much worse. But sometimes they do take a little bit, and you hope they don't come back with anything. If you do, you can't hire them. So you can't orientate somebody that isn't hireable. So if they haven't gone through that yet, we have to wait to schedule a day, and then the next 2 weeks we got holidays. So it makes it hard to find somebody. Not to defend that, because I think we are, to Alderman Sennett's point, way too late on this. So my comment was just, and it's going to be beating a dead horse a little bit. And I don't mean to disparage anyone that's been working on this, but it's not throwing up a fruit stand. These are people. We're talking about people. This is the business of people. So we should have been ahead of this way long time ago. And to Alderman Sennett's point and credit, he's been putting this out there for a long time, a lot longer than any of us. So I think, I thought we started early enough as well. And, we've been lucky in the fact that winter seems to be starting a little bit later every year. And so we have some of those warmer nights thrown in, but we've also had a few cold nights. And we're going to have some before this thing gets rolling. There's no doubt about it. So we have to do better than this. We have to. And if we don't have a plan next year after doing this for 2 years, then I don't know. I don't know what we're doing. We're not doing the right thing. So hopefully we can get this going as quickly as Director Cummings can get that stuff through and get them onboarded and ready to go. So thank you.
And
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree with Alderman, the Alderman's points just a second ago. We will do everything we can to move this as expeditiously as possible. We do have obviously some constraints, as mentioned. The one thing I will note, and I feel like it's something I should just talk a little bit about, is this background check and the Corey. So just so folks are aware, we won't be looking to preclude anyone from participating. We anticipate that that an individual may not have the most pristine background. So if someone has a substance abuse type infraction, that wouldn't disqualify them. We would, as a city, be looking to limit our liability. So if someone has something of a violent history, if someone has a theft, if someone has something in that type of background, that is what's going to preclude them. But I wouldn't anticipate someone having, a drug issue, a substance abuse issue in the past, necessarily ruling them out from being able to be an employee in this program. There's also a driving check that we need to do. Not that we're anticipating any of these employees needing to drive. Even if they were, we would obviously need to evaluate that, and we wouldn't necessarily not hire them if they had a driving record issue as well. But these are the type of things we would need to do just to get them to a place where we can orientate them, and we will obviously try to do that as quick as possible.
What software do you use to check Corey and background? Is it electronic, or are we sending like the piece of paper?
No, we're electronic at this point, so it does expedite things a little bit.
Great.
If it was a piece of paper, it would definitely take longer.
Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, since we brought it up a couple of times, like this Sunday, the overnight temperature is 4 degrees, so we do need to move on this. This is entering into the coldest, darkest part of the year. That's why we have the homeless vigil on Saturday, because this is the longest nights, which is apparently everybody better bundle up for. I just wanted to ask Director Cummings. It was pointed out that the job was posted some weeks ago and that it is available. But, I mean, a lot of us here consider this a priority. Would it be possible to put the job posting, given that this is an urgent situation, on the city's main page so that it's easier for people to find, directly apply, and maybe not go through Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever they have to do?
We could absolutely put it on the city's website. They still have to go through the Aptly Track program. But nonetheless, we can absolutely put it on the city's website and also make sure it gets out to other places as well, as you mentioned, Indeed. But we could also look at some others.
Director Bagley?
Yes. Director Bagley, Division of Public Health. Do we have to keep saying that all the time?
Yeah,
Okay,
for Donna to transcribe.
For the record. So we haven't had a problem getting people applying for this position. And as Director Cummings said, we're having rolling interviews and rolling offers with the PER Acts going through. So we're going through that process on a rolling basis. So we've already gone into our third group of folks that we've done our interviews with, and have, as I said, 2 sets have gone through. I just haven't gotten a chance to put the paperwork through for the ones that interviewed on Thursday. But we constantly are getting folks that are applying. And the pool of people that are applying are individuals that are working already in this field. And so they're hired for the most part, most of them are hired at agencies already. So we're not anticipating that there's going to be a lot of folks that are not going to pass the background check because they're already working. We are also looking at bringing on, and this is a best practice, that in some of these sites and settings, you bring on individuals that also have lived experience that are in recovery. So as Director Cummings said, there might be something that's going to pop up on their background check that says they have a history of substance use. And so those won't be individuals that will be disqualifying either. As folks come through the interview process, one of the questions I ask people is there a reason for us not to hire you? And believe it or not, people will tell us if there's a reason for not hiring them. And so we probably have maybe one individual out of all the folks that we've interviewed so far that Director Cummings is going to come up with a tick on their background check. But we also understand the circumstance of that tick. So we'll have some conversations. But other than that, from the pool of folks that have come through, these all look like very promising candidates to do this work, that are also very interested in serving this community and being able to give back to their community and their population, even in a greater way than what they're doing in their current jobs that they have right now. Alderman Clemens, or maybe Alderman Senate, asked, could we hire existing staff to work in the warming station, because the hours are 7 to 7, and many of our staff are already full time. We do have staff that are interested in doing that. That puts them into then the overtime space for them, because we would have to pay them overtime to be able to do this work, which I'm also open to doing. However, I don't want to set individuals up that are working full-time to be in the space of, well, I worked last night and I can't come to work, so we're going to try to avoid that as much as possible. But we are looking into, Alderman Senate, that there's an agency that is like I think it's like a staffing agency. They also applied, so we are going to look into bringing them on, again, so we can have the backup folks. But we do want to have a pool of people that are our steadily scheduled individuals, in this space, because that consistency is also going to help the folks that are coming in to use the site. So we did start this process right after we met with you all last year. You said, are we going to be back here doing this again yet? Next year, we started right away moving towards looking for where we would have a warming station. And so that did take a little bit of time. It was challenging, but once we got the okay for Elm Street, we started to move very quickly on that. So it may seem like it's still like we're not moving fast enough, but this happened relatively quickly once we got the okay to move forward with Elm Street.
And Director, we appreciate the entirety of the work you and your team are doing. I just, maybe there's a sense of the Alderman that your department's not getting the same amount of attention and support to push these things through in a more urgent manner. We don't want you to comment on that. But you can imagine how, and I think this is a perfect example of why I've been frustrated with the millions of dollars for the garage, money that's coming in to pay for HVAC here, for city employees to have heat, but there's no emergency preparedness person get on the Zoom tonight to say that someone's going to freeze overnight this weekend, and versus a garage collapsing. So different priorities, and it doesn't seem that public health and homeless folks who might freeze have the same priority as a garage getting fixed. That's my perception, and that's why I am irritated with some priorities, but I think your department's doing the best that you can with the resources that you have. Alderman Clee.
Thank you. You may have, and I don't know that this goes to, through you, Mr. Chairman, to either Director Bagley or Director Cummings. You may have mentioned it. I know the background checks, specifically the Corey, can take length of time, and I know you're doing it digitally, but do you have any idea as to what length of time you can expect?
So, is that for either
For
one
either
of
one
us?
of you, yeah.
Okay. So from my experience with even hiring some of the newer folks that,
Go
Director
ahead.
Bagley, for the record. In my experience, for some of the even most recent staff that we've hired, HR has done a phenomenal job. We've gotten some of these background checks done within 72 hours. And so it's been pretty quick. From my most recent hire of our behavioral health strategist, it was turned around relatively quickly. So I don't anticipate that it's going to take longer, like 2 weeks. Director Cummings, we haven't had that experience in a while.
Director.
Yep, correct. I would not think it would take anywhere near 2 weeks to do the criminal background Corey check portion of this.
Follow-up?
Yes.
Thank you. You also mentioned that, you were speaking to those that are already in the field and so on. Those that are currently working in the field and so on, you still have to do a Corey on them as well, even if they're already employed successfully within that area too. Does it take any less time, or it's the same amount of time, because even though they're already working in that field? So all things considered, if it took 72 or, so that would be about 3 days or so, 3 or 4 days, within a week we should know the background check. So within 2 weeks you should definitely be able to hire these people, get them on board. Orientation takes a day. And orientation is, may I ask what orientation is? We keep saying orientation, but specifically what are we talking about orientation? Just giving them the what your expectation is of them, or talking to them about city government, or what is orientation?
So there's two. there's orientation, sorry, Director Bagley. There's two, Director Cummings can speak to, there's orientation to the city, so HR does take folks through orientation on that aspect, and then there's orientation that we will do with some training for the individuals for the role that they will be providing.
And this, may I? I apologize. So the orientation, I would understand for the role of that, but for, as far as the city is concerned, that's something that could be done at a little bit later date. Is that, no, you all have to do it all at the same day, same time?
The city's orientation through HR has to be done first.
Oh, it has to be done first. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Day.
So I'm embarrassed to say I'm probably the only one who doesn't know this, but what's a CORI?
It's a criminal background check. Court, oh wait, no, I'm thinking of a CARI, a court activity report. But it's a, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Cummings or Director Bagley, but it's a criminal background check. And also, depending on the level of the background, it also looks for sex offenders, motor vehicle infractions. My company uses something that would give me someone who got a speeding ticket if it's a position that they need to drive a car, for example. Am I right on that?
It's very, yes.
Director Bagley's not.
Yes.
Yes.
So CORI is an acronym for something?
Inquiry, kind of.
We'll have to-
offender record information.
There, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Thank Google.
Director Bagley.
We call it Corey.
Director Bagley. So I do want to also help everyone to understand, so the warming station that we're opening at Elm Street, it's an overflow. So we're under the impression right now that folks won't have someplace to go. The National Soup Kitchen and Shelter is the primary emergency winter shelter that is open currently. And they provide 24/7 opportunity for folks to go in, and they can be there during the day at their Quincy Street site, and then from there, they check into the Spring Street site. So that is already open. So there are places for people to go if they do want to be inside. The Mission is still here, the Hope Center is still here, and then National Soup Kitchen and Shelter has opened their emergency winter shelter already. And so the Elm Street is really the overflow. And so although we might be opening a little bit later, there currently is a place for folks to go if they do need to go inside and they want to. So I do want us to know that.
Yeah, and I will add, so I'm on the board of directors for the Soup Kitchen, and we just opened it, I think, last Friday. And though we are still struggling with staffing, just like everyone else in that human services field is, to maintain the staffing. So it's like a thin ice. You know, anything, someone getting sick could mean a day that it can't be staffed. Any other questions? Alderman Lopez.
Just a point of clarification. Does the Soup Kitchen's warming station allow people who are under the influence?
Oh, that's an operational question. We have to reach out to Jane.
Okay. I just wasn't under the impression that if somebody appeared intoxicated or high or something like that, that they would actually take them. And I thought that was one of the reasons why we need this particularly.
My belief from orientation that I just received last week is that the
Yours is done already.
the state requires it to be, some of the beds to be low barrier, which means someone could come in under the influence. But I think there's situations where someone might have to go to the hospital versus staying in the shelter. All right, no more questions? Right. Well, thank you, Director Bagley, and Director Cummings for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Communications.
We have communications from Sam Durfee, Planning Manager, regarding referral from the Board of Aldermen on Ordinance O-24-042, amending the land use code regarding unrelated household occupancy in single-family dwellings. We also have communication from David G. Fredette regarding in support of O-24-042.
Without objection, I'll accept those communications and place them on file. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
There is none.
New business ordinances.
We have O-24-042, amending the land use code regarding unrelated household occupancy in single-family dwellings.
Is there a motion to amend? Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to move to amend ordinance O-24-042 by adding the following new section, 19016B3A. All single-family residential dwelling units of 2,000 square feet of habitable floor area or less are permitted a base occupancy of 4 unrelated individuals. For single-family dwellings larger than 2,000 square feet, the base occupation remains 4 unrelated individuals with additional unrelated occupancy allowed at the ratio specified in Table 16-1 applied to the habitable floor area exceeding 2,000 square feet.
Discussion on that motion. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I originally put my name, endorsed the original ordinance for this that was put out there. But I talked to Matt Sullivan today, and I saw that the planning board has put an unfavorable recommendation on this. So now I know this is the amendment part, so this is the part that makes it different. So I have some questions about Mr. Durfee, if he would come forward.
Sam, do you mind taking a seat, or do you want to speak from the podium? It's up to you.
How long are you going to have me up here for?
We'll see.
I would sit down.
If I get tired, I'll sit down. Sam Durfee, Planning Manager.
So my first question is, the original ordinance that we already have in place currently today, is there any background on why it was put in the way it was put in currently?
Yes, and I'd be happy to speak to this, but I would also look to Alderman Thibodeau. But generally, I think he provided a fair introduction to the legislation. I think that kind of colors,
I'm talking about what's on the books today, not necessarily what we put in place.
Yes, I would imagine still in line with overcrowding concerns, I would imagine, and I did speak very briefly with Bill McKinney, the building official, where there are some life safety concerns, and that's why there are occupancy. Obviously, NFPA has their own. We're slightly stricter. If 1 per 200 is NFPA, we're currently 1 to 300. So yes, overcrowding, life safety, that would be the guiding rationale.
Follow up.
So I know the planning board voted it down, but as the planning manager in our city, what are your thoughts on this?
Sure. So similar to some of the planning board's concerns, we're always, anytime we make a legislative change to an ordinance, unintended consequences are the #1 concern. We try to run through as many different scenarios as possible to really make sure that whatever we're proposing is really watertight and can mitigate against all these concerns. Similarly, as the planning board had articulated in the memo, but also in some of their discussion, they see this, it is, the legislation does specifically talk about single family. We have a whole table of other uses in building types. And so it's, the question came about of why is it just single family? And I think the board is aware that there's a background case to this that kind of triggered this reaction, and that's all well and good. Obviously, we try to do things holistically when we can, but when there is a clear leak or a problem, we jump quickly to address it. So the question about, is this a holistic approach? No, it's not. But, is this where the problem is in that table? Quite possibly. We haven't really seen anything else that's come up and really caused an issue. Again, with some other things that the planning board had talked about, they had initially said, the master plan, we have these housing goals. We really want to lower the barriers for housing. This would objectively make it a little bit more difficult, requiring more square footage. And in the housing market as it is today, where housing is quite expensive, it would essentially require, individuals, unrelated families or people living together to rent or buy a larger home than they may otherwise need, which is obviously carrying more expense with it. So these are some of the unintended consequences, possibly. But the board had articulated this, and it's reflected in the amendment, this idea of requiring or offering a base level of usage. And in the analysis of that, a smaller home, say 800 square feet, subject to the current regulations, would only be allowed 2 individuals, 1 per 300. This would actually give them a greater level of usage. So the amendment actually comes into play and gives smaller dwellings more usage than they would otherwise have a right to. But where the rubber really hits the road with this is the larger homes. And I think, we've seen the case where this was a larger home, and, when you really get into those occupancy levels per square foot, that's where this really can have an effect.
Follow up.
So is that a yes or no? Is the city for it or not for it?
We always want to work with anyone who poses legislation forward, and we do try and run all scenarios to figure out whether or not there's going to be a net benefit or other consequences.
Follow-up comment. So I originally jumped on this because I was being reactionary to a house in my neighborhood that just seemed like they kept cramming people in there. It wasn't a sober home or recovery home. It just seemed like they were putting way more people in there and there was cars all over the street. So I jumped on this. I didn't think of the unintended consequences until I started talking to different people, and even talking to Mr. Sullivan, Director Sullivan today as well on the phone, about what the planning board said, where there's potential discriminatory practices for this. And so I definitely do not want to be on that side of things. I think we have to watch out for the unintended consequences. So at this point, unless some of the discussion changes my mind here, I'm going to be probably voting against either one of these that come up. So,
And just to clarify, this went through I'm sorry.
Yeah,
This went through Corporation Council and had their signature on it.
Yes.
Alderman Clee, I'm sorry, Alderman Jettie, Alderman Govea, and then Alderman Clee.
Oh, okay. So what you just said, this wasn't why I raised my hand, but when you say Corporation Council signed off on it, I want everybody to understand that what Corporation Council does, they sign it as to form. Okay, they're not commenting on
Legalities.
right. They're just saying it meets the required form, not any more than that. So I just want to make sure.
This is why it's so helpful to have an attorney on the committee.
So, but, my question is, when I first saw this, I thought of the fact, I grew up in a home, it was 850 square feet, and there were 4 of us living there. So I'm thinking about, I'm trying to imagine, how this would affect, what it would be like to live, what these dimensions mean. So is there a difference between related people and unrelated people?
Yes, and that really is the crux of the issue here. This table that we're amending is the unrelated occupancy. So a related family, I believe it's by second degree, so cousins included, there are no regulations. And that is part of the planning board's concern when that word discriminatory gets thrown around. This is only targeting unrelated households, and in a time we're a multicultural city, the definition of related family, while we have something that is written into the code, there may be other totally acceptable cultural connotations to what that means, but that does not work with the code, and that may be putting other people in a bit of a bind. But so to answer your question directly, there is a difference in the code.
And what is the definition of family in the ordinances?
It is related by blood, marriage, adoption, and to second degree of kin.
To the second degree of
which
kin.
we take as cousins, aunts, uncles.
Okay.
Yes.
And earlier you said that somebody talked about homes that currently meet the code but wouldn't meet it if this was passed, and you said that they'd be grandfathered. So how does that work? So that if 8 people are living in a house now, 8 people, a different set of 8 people could occupy that house in the future?
Yes.
They'd be grandfathered It doesn't mean that the current 8 people have to stay there. So
That's-
if the house was, if you get, a change in population, what about if the house was sold?
That is an excellent question. We actually ran through a very similar question, again, looking at all scenarios. So because the ordinance contemplates 2 different types of household, I want to be clear, this is not a change of use, it's a change of occupancy type. Now, say the scenario you've outlaid where it's 8 people, they're unrelated, there can be tenant changeover. The house can sell. And then a whole nother slate of 8 people can move in, ownership changes, tenants changes, but the fact is that the occupancy type remains the same. It's still an unrelated household. There's no trigger from an ordinance standpoint that is a change per se, which would then result in that house losing its grandfathered status.
Okay. And one more. So we're currently looking at the code. Is this part of the code that we're currently looking at? And that there's a study going on, and are we jumping the gun by making a change now?
Not necessarily, but yes, we are very much looking at this. I've raised this with our code consultants who have worked in different parts of the country. They're pulling on experiences from other communities they've worked in that have even more acute issues than what we're seeing and reacting to with this ordinance today. I wouldn't say anytime that we bring any sort of legislation forward, in the process that we're in with the code update, that in any way, shape, or form we're jumping the gun. I think that we, and staff and as elected officials, we have a duty to respond to the needs of the citizens and your constituents. So anytime that we bring legislation forward, I wouldn't say that is jumping the gun.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Jettie. Mr. Durfee, when do you expect that zoning legislation to make it to the Board of Aldermen?
The comprehensive land use code update?
Yes.
Well, I can say with a fairly high degree of confidence that we will have a first draft that will be publicly available, likely in January, and then we will begin another round of public engagement, similar as we'd done back in March and May. And I do plan to reach out to every single one of you and have a sit down and kind of go through things and touch on your areas of concerns and go through it. So soon after that, I'm hopeful, fingers and toes crossed, that late spring, summer, God forbid fall, we'll have a new code. But I imagine the adoption process could be fairly lengthy. We do want to have as many public hearings as necessary, bring this to all the respective boards and committees, because this is no small undertaking.
All right. Alderman Gouveia, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question is, so has the planning board reviewed the amendment that's currently in front of us?
No, they haven't. They suggested the idea of establishing this base level of usage and then applying these square footage bases. They weren't really willing to opine on a number, so we've proposed 4. And 4 is reflective of that 1 per 500 ratio.
Follow up? Yes. And then just looking at the communities around us, what are their standards right now?
That's a very good question, because aside from Manchester, I'd say that we, being the very nature of us as a city, we have a unique set of challenges, a unique set of dynamics, a unique set of household typologies and building forms. So we have had conversations with some of the other cities in the state about this issue. And from those conversations, we've discovered that we might actually be a little bit further along down this rabbit hole of how you legally, but also responsibly regulate and combat some of these potential, either bad actors or, problems that you may encounter through this sort of use and associated regulations. And to be frank, there's really no good answer right now. We're all kind of just taking stabs in the dark. And legal challenges help to guide us, as painful as they are. We do have to lean on ADA and fair housing, but we are doing the best we can with the relatively limited information as we all try and navigate this convoluted legal landscape.
Yeah, different sort of question, but moving along, if this was enacted, to the enforcement aspect of it, currently, how many violations are we writing about over occupancies a year? And are we even really monitoring this as much as we should be?
Yeah, I couldn't speak to the number, but from an enforcement perspective, this would be challenging. There's no question about that. But, you know, to lay out a scenario, I think that this would largely be complaint-based. You know, you have a bad actor in a neighborhood, the residents are concerned, and, you know, hey, there's unrelated people there, they may be in excess. Okay, we'll go check it out. The burden of proof is really going to be on the owner of the house. You know, are there leases? You know, do we have any sort of documentation of how long they have been there? Has this group of people, has this type of unrelated occupancy been in existence prior to the adoption of this, what we're discussing tonight? And if so, they're grandfathered under the 1 per 300. Are they in violation of that? That's more things that we'd be looking into. But the documentation would be the next step that we would turn to, and we might have to get really granular. You know, there might not be formal leases. Who's paying the bills? Are there Venmo transactions between roommates? You know, these things would be very difficult to chase and enforce.
One more, if I can. Not really so much a question, but a statement. I think this is tough because I think it really dives down deep into a hole, and I'm not sure we really want to get into. And I'm starting to question myself if us handling the legal battles and the amount of money that's going to cost is worth the squeeze of what we're going to get out of this legislation. And I think that's really what I'm looking at now, is kind of the trade-offs between the two. In 5 years down the road, what's going to happen if this is enacted? Because I think it means well, and I understand why it was brought forward. It's just, it seems like a really tough situation. Then we're talking about grandfathering in places, and that's going to be messy. Because when does the grandfathering in stop? When does it start? And then it comes into an enforcement standpoint where we're now going to have to run investigations where we're checking birth certificates and seeing if you're really family or if you're friends. And then we're checking, like you just referenced, Venmo transactions to see if there's leases that apply to this or not. I think this could get extremely messy for something that I do find an issue, but I'm not sure if it's that big enough of an issue where this would be warranted. So I'm kind of on the fence on this now, and that's about where I stand.
Alderman Cleen, then Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. I have a few questions. First, just kind of to make a comment about the legal. One of the things when I was up in the State House that legal now has to do, and they do it in the analysis, is they have to state the NRO that is affected by this, and that's one of their jobs that they have to do, is they have to reference that, and they do a great job in that. But the other thing, and to my colleague from Ward 1, he stated exactly what I wanted to say, is that I think we're going to chase this down, and Mr. Durfee will know that I had a conversation with him, and I did speak to him about the potential of doing something very similar to this. And as I thought about it and I talked about it, I too felt that there were ramifications that we could end up hurting innocent people in this. And my concern was even two families, unrelated, one family with a group of children, another family with a group of children moving in together, and how this could affect them, and that they could not cohabitate, and how this would become unrelated, and so on. And I would not want them to not be able to either buy the house together, or to be able to live together, or to be able to rent or lease together. And to my colleague from Ward 1, the comment about trying to chase this down, that really concerns me. I also wonder if these communities that don't have this, Nashua kind of being a leader in this, is because they didn't want to go down that rabbit hole and make this. I do think we should have some limitations for the safety. We don't want every house to become a frat house. We don't want every house to become this. I also know that the state of New Hampshire has a number of individuals with developmental disabilities that we have been turfing out to other states and so on, and we are slowly bringing them back in, and we are using residential homes to become residential care facilities. I fear that us putting something like this through could have what would look like a negative effect on those, and we could become in violation of ADA, and it looked like that we are purposely trying to stop this from happening. I would have a concern that we could have ACLU, ADA, and all of these other people coming at us from a legal perspective, and I don't want to see something like that happen either. Trust me, I have people in my ward that would like to see that happen, and I understand their concerns and so on. I don't want to see it happen. I don't want to have us look like on the negative. I don't want to see lawsuits coming into the city. I don't want to see us on the bad end of that. I hope that you think really long and hard when you take this vote. I don't think it's a good idea. I do like the way the wording of the amendment does, that it's kind of more thoughtful of it, but I still think it's a slippery slope that we're going down. I think it's too, just too tight. It makes me very nervous that we're going down there, especially when it's coming on the heels of something recent that just happened. That's what makes me very nervous and very anxious. So having said that, I'll leave my comments.
Thank you. Alderman Clemmons, then Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was against this originally, as it was proposed originally. And I mean, I like the amendment in the sense that it's more open to smaller residences. However, I would not support it because of what it does to larger residences. So in other words, you know, in my opinion, I think there are better ways that we could potentially measure this. You know, but I lived in a house that, you know, with my ex-wife, and it was 985 square feet. If we had invited another couple to live with us, we would have been, you know, another unmarried couple, because we were unmarried at the time when we bought the house. We would have been in violation of the city ordinance. So that's why I like the, you know, the up to 2,000 square feet, allowing 4 unrelated individuals to live together. I certainly appreciate that. However, I don't see this as, I know that, you know, some of my neighbors in Ward 6 are upset that the sober home, if you will, for lack of a better term, is going in there. But they are, those folks are following our ordinances, right? They're taking the square footage of the house and they're following the ordinance. And I understand that, you know, okay, well, this is a solution to that in the sense that we're not going to allow that many people, but the problem with that is that when you're trying to solve a problem in one area and you're creating a problem in another area, so it doesn't address the actual issue at hand. And I think back to a conversation that I believe was in this committee earlier in the year, which was to, you know, maybe address how we could handle these particular homes in the future. And I think that conversation got derailed because we were in a lawsuit and we were being sued. And so we didn't want to make an ordinance change at that point, similar to what was going on with the asphalt plant. You know, we didn't want to make an ordinance change in regards to that particular issue either. So, you know, we're walking a tightrope here, but I do believe that there is a better solution to this. And so I'm inclined not to support any changes at this time, because I think that we could potentially have a better solution on the horizon that addresses the actual issue at hand. And so I'll leave it at that.
Alderman Lopez and Alderman Clee, then Alderman Tebow, but question to Manager Durfee, is this something that, since you guys are working on through the rezoning process, that this could something that we could tabled here to be amended later on?
Certainly, it's at your pleasure.
Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, I appreciate the committee hearing me. I'm not a committee member. I would just have a vote if it goes to the full board. And as it was initially proposed, I was very opposed to it because I represent one of the more densely populated neighborhoods, and I can think of a dozen ways that this would specifically impact populations in an unfair manner. Some of my own experiences too, particularly, you know, having worked at Ash Street and Kinsley Street, those were two emergency shelters that were essentially residences with a lot of unrelated people. They were operated by an organization and they were staffed, so there's a difference there, definitely. But Ward 4 is host to a lot of group homes, a lot of, as Alderman Clee mentioned, supportive housing where you may have adults that are working, but they also take on additional adults that need guardians or need some level of home care. And those are really important populations to bear in mind. Just last night when we were talking about veteran homelessness and veteran placement rates, it was pointed out that the voucher levels our rent rates are getting out of step with voucher levels. And one of the solutions that is discussed pretty regularly among people in residential programs and veterans is, what if a couple of us got together and got a place, you know? And that's a pretty time-honored solution to a lot of people's problems that we would be administering without, like, sight unseen, without considering the situation or its actual reception by the neighborhood or input, just with an administrative rule. So, I mean, you start considering foster families and, you know, mixed families, and even the youth homelessness issue that we have, where a lot of young adults and youths are sheltering with family members or with extended family members or even just friends. I wouldn't want to overcomplicate that, and I think this does run the risk of doing that. Even with the amendments that are presented, there's a lot of problems with it, specifically in the more densely populated neighborhoods. I am grateful to the people of Ward 4 that have been accepting of the number of sober houses and group homes. I think generally speaking, we have a lot of neighborhoods that understand need. And I think in turn, a lot of those places have contributed to the community, particularly the sober houses, because you have a large group of people that are committed to sobriety. You have a large group of people that are mutually accountable to each other, and they try to connect with the community and be involved in it. Not everyone. But I would argue that unregulated families certainly cause their level of mayhem and or fireworks. So I think putting too much legislation in place to solve one issue is unwise. And I think we have a better opportunity to do it, to address it holistically through the steps discussed that we've been working on for years. So I don't have a vote on this committee, but I would probably oppose either form of this in the full board.
And if I could just have my colleagues hold for a second, I'm going to call the vote for the amendment, so we can just move on to the full piece, if that's okay. Is that all right? So the motion is for to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it. The motion passes. All right, so is there a motion for to recommend final passage?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage as amended.
Right, Alderman Clee and then Alderman Tebow.
Thank you.
And Alderman Govea.
If I may ask, Mr. Durfee, this, as was originally or as amended, The children's home that's on Concord Street, not the one on Amherst Street, but the one on Concord Street. The one that it was before your time, but had been a lot of controversy within my ward and so on, lawsuit and so on against the neighbors. That, obviously, a lot of children unrelated, but that was a big house. Would that have fallen within this?
Unlikely. It sounds like a children's home. There's a program. There's something
Okay.
else going on here. It's
Residential
likely-
licensing and stuff like
It's
that.
unlikely that that would be considered a single-family home. Again, this legislative change is only making a change to the unrelated occupancy for single-family residences.
May I?
Yes.
So even though it was physically a single-family home, the fact that it was purchased by an organization and it becomes a children's home and so on for a business, this does not. So if a business were to buy a home and it was a business-related sober home, that different?
It's not necessarily the
Okay.
case. One of the core issues with the table itself is that it conflates use and form, where you have them next to each other, and they're two different things, which makes interpreting this table rather difficult. You can have a single-family home, and this kind of gets to the core of my initial interpretation around the 16 archery case is, what is it? It is a single-family home, but what is the use? And after a lot of, so I think one of the easy things to say was there are no services being provided. There's no program. This is just, it is an unrelated household living together. Granted, they're brought together by a common purpose. Because there's no treatment of any kind, it's not a halfway house. Now, halfway houses are not in that table. But a halfway house where there's a program, you're leasing individually, potentially, depending on how the program is set up, because there is a real engagement in recognizing that, yes, there is like an LLC or a business, that's not the deciding factor, but because there's a program, there's treatment, and so on and so forth, that wouldn't be considered a single-family home. That would likely be considered a rooming house. So suffice it to say, there's a lot of different nuances that we have to consider every time that we get this could come in as a building permit application. It may be really cut and dry at the building department level, but we get wind of it and we look into it and we say, whoa, there's all these other things and occupancy restrictions that we have to consider.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify because I know there has been controversy about that particular one, so.
And that's a very important clarification. There is no treatment at a sober home. There is no American Society of Addiction Medicine leveling system that identifies a sober home to have the treatment. People go to treatment in the community, whether it's a partial program, an IOP, outpatient, and then they go home where they are in a sober-free environment and don't have to worry about relapsing because someone else in that home is drinking, because that is a trigger that encourages people to negative peer influence. It's on the ASAM criteria that you need a place to go to recover that is free of substances in order to maintain your sobriety. Very important. No treatment's happening on site. You're just around a bunch of people who want to stay sober, which is very important to recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, through you to Mr. Durfee. Director Sullivan's taught you well. So Alderman GOV asked you a question about other communities. You said you had talked to Manchester. What does Manchester have set up for their rules on things like this?
So I can't speak exactly to their rules. I was not in the Director Sullivan had that conversation, and I believe it was actually in a more kind of free-form, like post-conference, like, hey, what are you guys doing? That sort of kind of free-form discussion. I think they're regulating it differently. I cannot opine on the legality of their approach. I imagine they have done their research, but we're doing ours as well.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Govea. Alderman Jettie?
When does, when you're measuring these, the people in a home, so, when do you judge them under the unrelated standard as opposed to the family standard? Like if you've got, a family of 4, and then some unrelated person joins in, do you then look at them as 5 unrelated people?
Nope, you wouldn't. You would have a related family, so their occupancy, this is you're asking me a question on the fly that I have to think about because we actually didn't run this scenario, but this is a brilliant question.
Leave it to Alderman Jetting.
So my approach would be, if you're taking a related family, doesn't matter how many individuals, and then you introduce a unrelated individual, I think that it would be reasonable to calculate the related family as one individual in this case. They represent one party, if you will, one relation. And then you bring another individual who is unrelated, then you have 2. So the addition of the unrelated, that would trigger, compliance with the unrelated occupancy standards. However, if you kept bringing in unrelated individuals, you would eventually exceed, but, then we get into the enforcement of who actually owns the house, who's the family, and so on and so forth.
So if you had a family of 10, you'd count them as 1, and you had another family of 10, that would be 2? So you'd have 20 people?
That's another great question.
You think that was 2 people?
I reserve the right to change my mind, but in that scenario that I just laid out, yes, that rationale would still follow. But you kind of are getting to the point of how we're not regulating related, but we are unrelated, and the discrepancy there is, I think, significant.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this has some work that could be done to it, and I know my colleague to my left wanted to look at some other options, so I am going to motion the table.
All right, that's a superseding motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. This legislation is tabled. Thank you, Manager Durfee. I think at the end of it, you might have been thinking I should have had a seat. All right, general discussion. Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say, in regards to the last ordinance there, I voted to table it because, I don't agree with it in the form that it's in, but if, the author of the legislation thinks that, wants to work on it and thinks maybe there's something better, I'm always open to look at things. I keep an open mind, and I don't know what could possibly change my mind, but I'm open to it, and so I'm always for doing the work, and so anybody that thinks I just don't want anyone to think one way or the other out there of why I voted to table it. I think this is where you do the work. And if someone wants to bring something forward and wants to continue working on it, we should allow them to do that. So I just wanted to make that clear.
And I agree, and that's the reason why I tabled it. I also co-sponsored the legislation with my colleague from Ward 6. I'm not going to get into the T's tonight because my speech is going to go off the rails again.
But what's the problem?
The reason why I genuinely had interest in it is not the fact of the sober home piece. Is I see it as a issue that needs further discussion and evaluation. The planning department's already in the middle of doing that through a citywide rezoning process. I also, having been a social worker in the community, I've seen things that are not related to sober homes whatsoever, but I've seen unauthorized rooming houses, various other things of putting people in scenarios that are very unsanitary, and whether it's space or tying it to bathrooms or bedrooms or whatever it might be, there are sanitary issues in the city that some folks don't see. And I understand this came from Ward 6 constituents reaching out to their alderman. I don't agree with the aspect of trying to not allow people to be in sober living. Like I said, I'm a social worker. After I leave office, I will probably open 3 in the city. And to avoid any conflict, I won't be an alderman at the time. But the other things that are underlaying in the city, Director Bradley and her team probably see it more frequently than others when they're doing inspections. But there's stuff happening where just needs further eye, and I think tabling it's a good idea. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, I voted against tabling it, but I still think I'm in the same opinion as the people who tabled it. I just think that you could kill legislation and still have different legislation come out. So it's this or that. It doesn't really matter. You can have new legislation either way. So I'm not opposed to looking at different things as well. To Alderman Moran's point, I think there's other things in the city in dwellings that are more problems than this particular legislation that we do have to look at, that may be, like you said, unsanitary. And I just didn't think through the unintended consequences of this when I first sponsored it. So, again, wouldn't mind looking at some other ways to fix some of these things in the city, but I was fine with either killing it and starting over or tabling it. Either way, it's fine by me. So that's it.
Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, so I would, if this comes back, either independently or as part of the the code, the general code revision, I think there are some legal issues that were raised here, and we don't have legal counsel here to advise us. So I would ask if it comes back.
I will certainly invite them and have them present to answer the questions.
Thank you.
Alderman Thibodeau.
I'd like to thank everybody's for their input, the citizens and the remainder of the aldermen. So I definitely understand everybody's concerns. There's definitely some things I didn't take into account either. So I appreciate the opportunity to, again, like Alderman Tebow said, you could still bring it back even if it got killed. But the opportunity to see if something better can be come out of this.
Okay. Public comment. Anyone from the public wish to comment at this time? Seeing none. Remarks by Alderman. Alderman Tebow.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the last meeting I'll be in. I'm not coming to finance before the holidays, so I just want to say happy holidays to everybody out there in the public and everybody here as well.
I will. Alderman Lopez.
Not even on the committee, so I appreciate it. I just did a drive-by mention of the longest night vigil. It's going to be this Saturday at 5 at City Hall. It recognizes the longest night of the year as well as the longest night for people who are homeless. So any members of the public who have people who are homeless that we want to remember, please send me those names. Any aldermen who are available Saturday at 5, please attend.
All right. And I, too, again, would like to wish the entire city a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, and a Happy New Year. And anything else I missed. Alderman Govert, do you have a motion?
I move to adjourn.
That's in order. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. We're adjourned at 8:39 p.m.